In a relationship, when is honesty not the best policy? How do you balance what you want versus what you need? And is there something you need to say to your spouse but can't find the right way to say it? If so, then you're in the right place. This is the Lunch with Sandy podcast. With nearly 20 years of marriage under their belts, Terrence and Sandy Jackson discuss a range of topics, provide valuable insights on relationships, and talk about the conversations married couples need to have. So what does lunch have to do with all of this? Well, it's a metaphor for how these conversations originally started. Speaking of conversations, let's get one going. Here's your hosts, Terrence and Sandy.
Hello and welcome to the Lunch with Sandy podcast. I'm Terrence.
And I'm Sandy.
And as always, we will be having the conversations that married couples need to have. So Sandy, what's good?
It's cold.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens during wintertime. Specifically, I was wondering how you were feeling after your night with the tequila moms last night. Shout out to tequila moms. You know who you are.
It's good. I have a slight headache, but still woke up at an appropriate time this morning.
See, that's why whiskey dads are better than tequila moms.
No.
We don't wake up with those hangovers.
But that's a separate conversation than today.
You're 100% right. That is a separate conversation today. So what are we chewing on today?
Well, yeah. Last time we talked about the basics of a successful relationship. So let's go to the next part, which is more about the foundation. So we got the basics. Now let's talk about the foundation. Right.
And so when I think about the foundation of any relationship, I always compare it, or I always say it's analogous to when you're looking to buy a home, right? So Most people, you included, when you go and you look at a home, you look at the number of bathrooms. Does it have a big kitchen? Is it open concept? Everyone wants to look at those details.
Is it shiny?
Is it shiny? Yes, is it shiny? But when I talk about the foundation of a relationship, I do compare it to the foundation of a home, right? So you can have the nice kitchen and all of those things, but if that foundation of that home is not solid, you're basically getting something that it's not going to last you very long.
Yeah.
So
I'd have to agree.
So the foundation of any relationship is just like the foundation of a home. You got cracks in that foundation of your home. You may have cracks in your relationship, not your relationship, the foundation of your relationship, and you got to work to compare those. So let's talk about what makes up those. Let's talk about what makes up the foundation of many relationships, right? And the first thing I want to talk about is keyword. We used it a little bit last week. It was part of that communication piece. But the first part of making sure that you have a solid foundation comes down to really being honest, right?
Yeah, and not just honest with your partner, but honest with yourself.
Yeah, it's honest with yourself, honest in not just what you say and what you do, right? Because honesty is an act of expression, but being honest with who you are, it's like,
I am what I am. You get what you get.
Well, you don't want to have that whole that whole bait and switch, right? So when you're courting someone, you show all the nice sides. You know what I mean? You're opening the doors. I don't know if people open doors anymore, and I'm not trying to date myself. But at the end of the day, I do put my shrink wrap back on, and I go in that box because I'm vintage. But anyway, you don't want to show just a portion of who you are. Right? You got to be honest with who you truly are, because in order for two individuals to accept each other, you got to know each other.
Mm-hmm. In stages. Agreed. But still honest. You can't let the crazy out all at once, but you still have to be
crazy
honest.
Is as crazy does. And I do think that if you're crazy, you probably want to let the person know up front. and I mean, for the most part, most people do have a little. I mean, I knew you were a little crazy.
Okay. Just
I mean, I didn't have a sense of the level. I mean, you did hide the levels for a while. I mean, and it's funny how, you know, when you're in a relationship and things are going well, and I touched on this, you know, in the last episode, things are well. Sometimes you don't really see the full crazy until that one time where things don't go well. But I was committed.
Yep.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah. The shiny wears away. And then you're left with the crazy.
The crazy and the dusty. Sometimes you got to get that pledge out and polish up that little dusty piece. So, you know, the thing about honesty is honesty leads to a number of other things. And you don't want to build something based off deception.
Agreed.
Because you'll get to a point where obviously what you think you have or thought you have is not real.
Yeah. And honestly, it's the reverse situation too, if you think about it. Like I said, being honest with yourself, self-reflection, right? Are you changing the person that you are to try to fit into the mold of what this person is looking for? So I think it goes both ways. It's not just, you know, somebody letting you know what they are, but at the flip side, also making sure that you're not trying to change yourself for someone as well.
Yeah. And from the perspective of being honest, I don't even look at it from that angle of change. You know who you are. The question is whether or not you're upfront about who you are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Sometimes people
downplay, or again, there's a fine line between, you know, not being upfront with who you are and saying, oh, well, I was that. Well, it's not even a fine line, right? Saying I was that person, I've just changed, right? Because we're talking about when you start to build a relationship, you're in those initial, I don't want to say those initial phases, but that early stage of that relationship, that's where honesty is going to be key. And if you're not honest in those early stages, then I don't know what that's going to lead to.
It's going to lead to cracks in the foundation.
And cracks in that foundation. Here's the other thing that honesty leads to, and this is why it's so important to make sure that, you know, both parties are not just honest in what they say and how they express it, but also in who they are. Honesty leads to trust, right? Yep. And so trust is basically, it's, you know, being who you say you are and doing what you say you're going to do, right? Because then when you trust someone, you can rely on them.
Yep. That's what I was going to say, is reliability.
Reliability, you depend on them. You understand that if I get myself into a situation, right, I can trust that my partner is going...
A baseball bat?
Well, not necessarily have a baseball bat. See, this is what happens when you...
Waiting. Just in case.
This is what happens when you go out with the tequila moms and the next day you got to sit down and do an episode. You got baseball bats and all that craziness on your mind. No, when you trust someone, you know that regardless of the situation, they're going to be there for you, right? Whether it's, you know, you trust that if you need a ride home after a bout out with that bottle of tequila, someone's going to be there to actually come pick you up. You can trust that, you know, when it comes to whatever it is that you need to do as a couple, you know, someone is going to have your back and going to be putting in that work so you don't have to carry all the load. And the other thing too, you know, it's, and I got to stop saying, you know, the other thing too is trust is not something that happens overnight.
No, definitely not.
You got to work your way and build up trust.
Yep. And it takes different experiences to continue to build that trust.
100%.
You know, to the point of, like I said, reliability. If you said that you're going to be there at 6 p.m. to pick me up, making sure you're there at 6 p.m. to pick me up.
That's walking the walk and talking the talk.
Right.
That's what it is.
If I'm going to say I'm leaving work at 5 p.m., you know, I might need 15 minutes, but it's around 5 p.m.
Well, yeah, and that's also a conversation for another time. That 15 minutes, that temporal time shift that you're in when it comes to how long it's going to take you to get things done.
So always trying to fit in one last thing. That's my problem. I admit it. I'm honest.
Well, I gotta be able to trust that when you say you're going to be ready in 10 minutes, you're actually going to be ready in 10 minutes.
That's why usually I try to overestimate.
That don't work very well.
Be ready. So
That
I'll
don't
say
work very
20
well.
minutes with the goal of being ready in 10. Again, self-reflection and knowing your limitations as well. I am who I am.
Yeah, but trust is one of those. I mean, that's a major part of that foundation, because if you don't have trust, then what do you have?
Yeah.
You know, I can't imagine being in a situation where I have to rely on someone, but I can't trust that they're going to do the things that I need them to do.
Yeah, I can't say you really have a relationship if you don't have trust, you know? Trust is the key ingredient.
Well, the strange thing is, people think differently. You know what I mean? People put themselves in situations where, although they may not be able to trust someone, that 4-letter word, as they call it, love, sometimes keeps them from making decisions that they actually have to make. And that's the same thing with honesty. Again, I can't see myself in a situation where if someone's not going to be honest with me, and history has shown me that they're not honest, that I would continue to put myself, into that situation.
Yeah, no, but you're right. People do, I think, and kind of to the point that I was bringing up earlier, where they're not always honest with themselves. Sometimes they try to change themselves for someone. I think sometimes people feel the need to have someone to love and to love them back without really putting in the time and the effort for that love. The word love is used very loosely at times where that's not necessarily the case. It's maybe more of an attraction, not wanting to be alone. It could be for various reasons, but at the end of the day, you have to really look at it and be like, is this truly what it should be? Or am I just making it up in my head and want it to be something more than it's not?
Well, that's why another piece or another thing that I think about when I talk about, when I think about that foundation is respect, right? And it's respect for yourself, and it's respect for that other individual in that relationship. And it's not only respect for each other, but respect for understanding what each other actually brings to the table.
Yes, agreed.
Because if you have that respect for yourself, right? And we can get into the respect for the other individual, and I guess we can tackle both of those at the same time. If you have the respect for yourself, when you encounter a situation, or you're in a situation where your significant other is not being honest with you, or your significant other is not trustworthy, that respect that you have in yourself should cause you to look at yourself and say, hey, listen, I deserve better. And from the perspective of having respect for that other individual, you need to be honest and say, hey, not only do I deserve better, I expect better. And not only do I expect better, you should be better, because you're missing it here, here, and here. I think with respect, I think with honesty, and I think with trust, maybe not necessarily in the other individual, but trust in yourself, you would be able to relay that information to that individual. Because if it is love, and I just used air quotes for all you individuals who can't see me, and that's everyone, because this is just an audio podcast, there's no video. When you use that word love, taking all those other factors into consideration, you should be able to have that conversation and point out to that individual, you're not being who you are claiming to be.
Yeah, well, like we touched upon also in the last episode, it's It can't be a one-way street. It can't be one person putting in all the effort, trying to build that trust, trying to have that respect for the other individual, and then there's no reciprocation there. It's going to not work out. You can't just have one heavy load on one person and then light load on another. It's not balanced. You don't have a balanced relationship that way.
Yeah, and I think another part of that, and this is also something that will help build that that foundation is priority, right? And when I say priority, what I mean is what you're building has to be a priority for both parties.
Yep.
The effort has to come from both individuals. So many times in life you get caught up with, you name it, work,
Yeah, everything.
kids,
Life, period.
whatever, that focus sometimes can shift. And if you don't make your relationship a priority, then that foundation is not going to be as strong as it should be. And once again, you can end up with cracks in that foundation, cracks in your relationship that make it harder for you to actually build what it is that you're trying to build.
Right. And the priority isn't necessarily that you have to spend every moment together, right? Those might lose themselves in their relationship and forget about their friends. That's not the priority. The priority is knowing, hey, we haven't spent time together, for an example. I have the choice of going out with my friends or I have the choice of going out with you. It's not completely.
Is that what you did last night?
Maybe. So let me make this week about you and next week about my friends. It's not about, completely cutting off a part of your circle, we'll say. It's about prioritizing when it needs the priority versus just being like, oh, this is the person that I'm with, and this is the only amount of time that I have to spend, and is going to be all with that person. So I think there's a difference there with priority, and want to make sure clarify that point. Priority just doesn't mean that you have to be attached at the hip.
No. Priority listen, when you're trying to build something, right? And you're talking about a relationship, at times you have to prioritize the relationship, like you said. It's not a situation where you have to stop being who you are. You have to be with some 24/7. All relationships, whether you're married or not, they take work. And you have to prioritize, or you have to be willing to make things in that relationship a priority at times in order for that to happen. And just so I want to clarify one other thing. Sandy did not prioritize going out with the girls last night. It was Tyson. Happy birthday to Tyson. It was Tyson's birthday yesterday. So she went, her and Ayla, and they went to celebrate Tyson's birthday at his house. Yes.
Yep. It was his little birthday party. Yep.
But that was the priority last night. No, I'm just kidding. The other part or the other piece that I think is essential into building a strong foundation is we talked about prioritizing, what needs to be prioritized in a relationship, but also nurturing that relationship and nurturing the intimacy portion of that relationship. When they have that phrase, they call it the honeymoon phase, when two people meet, right?
That's the shiny and new phase.
Yeah, and everything is shiny and new, and it's like a new toy. You play with it all the time, but then that new toy is not new anymore. And when I say new toy, we don't have any other toys. It's just the two of us.
Talking about a children's toy.
Yeah, when I wasn't going there, I was talking about the new toy. You get another new toy. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. It's like when. I think we talked about plants last week. You have a plant, right? You have to water it. You have to nurture it. Mm-hmm. Every relationship, you have to nurture pieces of that relationship. And you got to, ultimately, you have to nurture the intimacy in that relationship.
Yes. So, right. Not judging anyone who has additional toys in that nurturing, but yes.
We accept all
Yes.
types of relationships here.
But
we're just not one of those other types.
that could be part of nurturing, but at the same time, right, it's nurturing. It's speaking to one another. It is spending time, quality time with one another, not always necessarily sitting in front of the TV and watching TV. That's not really necessarily nurturing a relationship. That's just more.
I think it depends on the show.
Presence with one another. However, if you watch a show and then talk about it, that's still nurturing the relationship. It's talking about things,
As long as you're not talking about the show while it's on.
Oh, what was different from the book?
Don't talk about the show while it's on. We can have a conversation about the show maybe when it's over, but not while it's on.
Touche. That's perfectly appropriate. We can wait to have the conversation, but it's not just being in the room with one another. That's not really nurturing a relationship, but it's the quality time that you're spending with one another as well. So kind of like everything we've talked about, communication, honesty, just talking about your life experiences, past experiences.
I'm just making sure that you don't keep pulling away from the mic because I don't know if you noticed, but when you do that, your voice is going out.
Thank you.
See, right now we're having a nurturing conversation with the proper use of the equipment that's in the room that we're actually using. See, I'm being nurturing. No, yes, you're right. And it's nurturing all aspects of the relationship, and it doesn't always have to happen, every day or all the time. It's sometimes it's the little things.
Well, it's being present in the time that you do have together. It's not the quantity; it's the quality.
Yeah, being present. Yes, I'm here.
You're here. Well, I am.
See,
Physically present as well as just in the moment present.
Most of the time I'm
distracted by other things.
Most of the time I'm in the moment. If you come and you ask me a question and I'm already preoccupied, that's the only time that I'm not in the moment.
But
you're trying to skip the line in those cases.
We all do it. You're having a conversation, the phone goes off and we get distracted, right? It's minimizing those distractions, being in the moment. You have to be in the moment. So spending the time, quality time, and, obviously if you have children, it's kind of hard to not get distracted, but hence kind of why, we started these conversations.
Yeah. And another piece to that, building that strong foundation is listening, right? And I say listening because, actually, I should say listening and also hearing, because, you can listen and not hear what someone's saying. But
see, I would have said that in reverse, hearing versus listening. Hearing, you hear the words. Listening is you're really understanding the words.
No, I can listen to someone yelling from upstairs and not hear them.
I guess. We agree to disagree.
There we go. That's one of those things. Agree to disagree. Again, from the last episode, sometimes you just got to agree to disagree. Now, as I was saying before Sandy tried to turn around what I was saying, listening is important because you're going to ultimately come across a situation where you're going to want to get what you want to get off your chest, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're not listening to what the other person's saying, you're not going to accomplish anything. And the other part why listening is important is because listening actually helps you build patience. Because when you listen and actively hear, you still may have something that you want to get off your chest, but if you're listening the correct way, you're going to be patient and allow your significant other to say whatever it is that they need to say. And then once that's done, you could either say what you had in mind to say, but after listening to what they've said and showing that patience, it might change what's going to come out of your mouth.
Yeah. Otherwise, right, you're just going to continue to argue the same points over and over again, and you're never going to come to any type of resolution.
Well, yeah. And sometimes it's not even about arguing. Like, let's say, for instance, you got a birthday coming up, right? Uh-huh. And you've been talking about whatever espresso maker you've been talking about. By the way, I was over at Davian's house and he has this espresso maker and it has all these lights lit up on it and whatever. And I thought about you. He paid way too much money for that thing. But anyway, I digress. You have a birthday coming up. If I'm an active listener when you're talking about certain things, I can pick up on, oh, well, you know what? She was talking about this $1 million espresso maker that nobody in the world's going to buy, but they got one on sale for $2.50 down at, Target. I may have to go pick her one up.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Fortunately, my espresso maker was closer to the $2.50 than the million, but
I mean, isn't everything closer to the $2.50 than a million?
No, definitely not. I was looking at house prices the other
I don't
day.
know why you look. Let's get back to listening. What we're talking about here, because house prices got nothing to do with.
You asked me a question, I answered it.
We're talking about the foundation of the relationship, and we already have to worry about this. Speaking of foundations, I was over at Forest Avenue the other day. Some foundation work. See, now we're getting sidetracked. There's some foundation work. In order for that place to remain strong, we got to do some foundation work over there.
Yes, we do. Got to repair those cracks, take care of everything.
Now you're listening. It's an exercise in patience. Because if you recall, I talked to you about the foundation over there previously. And now here we are again.
At that point, it's about priorities.
There you go. It's about priority.
At that moment in time, it was not necessarily a priority. You got to learn how to prioritize there, honey.
For those of you out there listening, if you haven't figured it out yet, we tend to blur the lines every now and then. We were talking about the foundations of a relationship, and now we're actually talking about the foundation. Although I did start this by saying building a relationship is analogous to buying a house and, making sure that you're checking out the foundation, which is something I do and not worried about whether or not it has a open kitchen and all that other good stuff.
Well, see, that's why we complement each other well. You focus on the foundation and I focus on the other things. I feel like we have a good, strong foundation. We know what each other is focusing on. This
is an exercise in listening and in patience. That is exactly what is happening right now.
At least we're honest with one another.
Yes, we are honest with one another.
I know what you're going to go look at, and I know what I'm going to go look at. And hence, then we come together, communicate, and we make the decision.
Yep. And again, this is one of those situations, just as in the first episode, where we start to go a little bit off the rails, which reminds us that it's probably about that time when we start talking about wrapping up this episode. So let's go over again what we talked about during this episode. Basically, we were discussing those points or how to make sure that as you go along through your relationship, you're building a solid foundation, right?
Yep.
Honesty is huge. I mean, I can't stress that enough. You don't want to start building something off with a lie. You don't want to build off deception, because if you're not being honest, again, not just with yourself, with who you are and what you're about, you're only going to run into problems down the road.
Definitely.
And honesty will lead to trust. Trust leads to you being able to count on each other, you knowing and understanding that that person who you've partnered with is going to be there when you expect them to be there, and they're going to be the person who you expect them to be. And again, trust is not built overnight. It takes time to build trust.
Yes.
And also, we discussed respect. Respect for yourself, respect for the other party, and respect for understanding what each other has to offer. When you respect yourself and you respect that other party, taking into account honesty and trust, that foundation is going to be rock solid.
Yes. And then the nurturing piece.
Nurture. Yes, making sure that you nurture your relationship and those pieces of that relationship as time goes on. And at the same time, prioritizing not just aspects of the relationship, but each other at times. It doesn't have to be all the time. And then finally, listening. We've learned today that if we listen to Sandy, we become more patient and understanding.
And in the other point too is nurturing the relationship as well and respecting it and prioritizing it all also has to do with repairing any cracks in those foundations.
100%, 100%. And so those are the things that we talked about today. Basically keys to building a solid foundation in any relationship. So at this point, we're going to say thank you for listening. Tune in for the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow.
That's it for this week's episode of the Lunch with Sandy podcast. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback and comments on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Lunch with Sandy. And be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us. Thanks again for listening to the Lunch with Sandy podcast.